Hey everybody, welcome back to In Bed with a Millennial. I'm the Millennial, Javeda Bay, and this is my bed. And it's still April, which means I am still working to destigmatize and push back on the shame surrounding STIs. So let's do that. Today I want to talk specifically about one STI, HPV. Javeda, what's HPV? Let me tell you, HPV is also known as human papillomavirus. It is a virus that affects DNA, essentially. But there are 90 different strains of HPV, 90 different strains. Some of them can cause cancer, some lead to the development of genital warts, but 90 different variations of human papillomavirus. HPV is actually a very common STI, so common that nearly everyone on the face of the earth will contract HPV at some point in their life. And by nearly everyone, I mean 80%. 80% of all human beings will contract HPV at some point in their life. Currently in the United States, 42 million plus individuals have HPV. 42 million plus. That's pretty common. That's a lot of people, making it extremely common, right? Yeah, it's extremely common. But somehow it's not talked about nearly enough. So we're going to talk about it. Firstly, okay, cool. This is a super common STI, Jave. How do you get tested for it? Well, that's where it becomes really tricky. The only folks who actually get tested for HPV are folks with vulvas and uteruses and cervixes. Yeah, and the only way to get tested is through a pap smear, that annual exam that you get where someone goes in and they swab your cervix. Yeah, that swab is actually where how they test for HPV. They then go look at the cells that came off of the cervix to see if any of them are infected with or show abnormalities because of HPV. And it's so wild because how common it is, how this is the only way to test for it. There's a lot of missing information out there. Like what happens if you do have HPV and you get your pap smear and things do come back abnormal. And you've probably seen, there were some videos on TikTok going around that were talking about it. There's this procedure called a colposcopy, which is where they go and they cut off a little piece, not cut off, they hole punch a little piece of the cervix to test it to see if there's cervical cancer. Because, as said before, HPV, certain strains, can cause cancer. Cervical cancer being one of those. So they do a colposcopy to test for it. But yeah, with how common HPV is, and the only way that you can test is if you have a uterus and a cervix and you get a pap smear. Like, it's so multi-layered. And then it also explains why it's so common, because there are a lot of things that play into getting a pap smear. One, having access to medical care. If you don't have insurance, necessarily not the easiest thing for you to do. Depending on where you live, you may not have access to a doctor. There's a whole lot of reasons. So you have that. Another reason why it's so common. If you have a penis, you are not tested for HPV. There is currently no test to test penis owners for HPV. So if they were to have it and they engage in sexual activity with others, they could be spreading it without knowing because there's no way to test for it. Well, I guess no way is not true. If there happen to be genital warts, then genital warts can be swabbed and then that can be tested to see if it's HPV. But outside of that, no way. And also, you'd have to go to a doctor if you were to have genital warts. And again, that whole thing of medical access. So it's super understandable how common HPV actually is when you think of all the different ways that it's very hard to prevent, seeing as how only way you would get tested for it is through a pap smear. Really, that's the only way, a pap smear. And did you know that traditionally it's not recommended for you to get a pap smear until your 20s, a little later into your 20s for some folks. Yeah. But now that we know how they actually test for it, are there any treatments or any ways to prevent HPV? Sort of, kind of. So if you were to have genital warts and they got swabbed and it came back that it was HPV, you could get medication from your doctor for the genital warts. That's one way, and that's specifically only if there are genital warts present, really. The only other option, besides doing your routine pap smears and getting that test done and testing to see if you actually have HPV, there is a vaccine for HPV. It is called the Gardasil Vaccine. And I remember it really was I guess it really became a thing in my early year, like when I was still in like grade school, so like middle school, high school is when I at least heard about it. And so it's a vaccine that you can get. It's like 3 different shots. That it helps to prevent the contraction of HPV, specifically the strains that can lead to cancer. And it's actually a vaccine that is for everyone. It's not just for girls. Anyone can get it. And originally it was just marketed specifically for children. There's been since there's been studies and like more literature around it, so you can actually get the HPV vaccine into adulthood. So if you didn't get it in middle school or high school and you're like, hey, I actually think I might want to, talk to your medical provider. You could probably still get it. But yeah, so really all there is that shot. Shots, plural, there's 3 shots. But the Gardasil vaccine is really the only treatment for HPV. So what does all this mean, Jave? It means that one of the most common STIs pretty much doesn't have any symptoms. You don't have any symptoms of it outside of genital warts that really tells you like, oh snap, I have HPV. Or unless you're getting a pap smear, there's really not any medicine for it unless you have actually have the genital warts. And really the only preventative measure you can take is getting the vaccine. So do with that information what you will. But that's HPV, an extremely, extremely common STI. Very important STI to talk about because potentially it can lead to forms of cancer. So we should be talking about it a lot more, and educating around it a lot more. So that's why I did this. You get it? But yeah, that's HPV. Make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. You are following me on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter if you really want to. You are subscribed to my email newsletter, and you're coming back next week for an all new episode of In Bed with a Millennial because I say it so. And you're super ready for May because Masturbation May is so close. And y'all know how I feel about masturbation. So get ready for a good time. And yeah, until then, I'm gonna see y'all later. Deuces.